Glad you could be here for today's presentation. It's one of the more important aspects of our lives that we're going to talk about, sleep. And yet, as important as it is, it's one of the least understood. But in the last decade or so, there's been a lot of research on sleep, and we now understand much more than we ever understood before. Sleep, we often think of sleep as rest because we wake up in the morning rested and refreshed. But the brain isn't actually resting during the time that we're sleeping. It's actually very active. It just has different tasks that it's doing, and these tasks do not want us to be conscious, but unconscious. And so we are asleep during that time, but the brain isn't actually resting. It's working really hard during that time, and if it were not for the work that the brain was doing then, you wouldn't be able to continue with your conscious life in this world for the rest of the coming day. If you live to be 90 years old, you will have spent 30 years of your life unconscious in the state of sleep. It's absolutely essential. You can't avoid it. We need it. Did you get enough sleep last week? Can you recall the last time you woke up without an alarm clock, feeling refreshed, not needing any caffeine? 2/3 of us do not get the recommended 8 hours of sleep. Somewhere between 7 and 9 hours is the ideal number for most people. And it's absolutely essential to get this sleep. The effects of sleep deprivation are very harmful on the body. One of the parts of us that is affected is the immune system. Sleep deprivation demolishes our immune system, sets us up for increased infections. The cells of your immune system need to be refurbished, and they are refurbished during the time of sleep. They need to build up all of the ammunition and supplies to carry on the battle against bacteria and viruses. It's during this time that they make up the various communicator molecules and send the messages back and forth. And so it's absolutely essential if we're going to be successful in fighting off the bacteria and other microbes that can infect us and cause serious harm. We need good, sound sleep, 8 hours of it every night. But it's not only fighting infections. Your immune system job is not only recognize foreign invaders from outside your body, but also to recognize invaders from within inside, rebels, the cancer cells, cells that have altered, changed, and are no longer behaving as they should. The immune system needs to recognize those and destroy them. And if you get a good sleep, usually they're able to carry on that job. We're obviously making cancer cells on a regular basis in our body. The immune system recognizes them and destroys them, and we're okay. It's only when the immune system fails and the cancer can take off and spread and grow that we end up getting diagnosed with cancer down the road. Alzheimer's disease. Sleep deprivation is one of the key lifestyle risk factors determining whether or not you're going to develop Alzheimer's disease. Devastating condition, the brain is broken down and shrinks away, and we lose cognitive function, we lose memory, and not just memory, but all of the other parts of the brain seem to go with it, and eventually we will die, and because we just can't carry on the basic life functions of the body without the brain directing and coordinating those functions. We know that sleep deprivation is one of those risk factors. If you're not getting enough sleep, you are definitely at higher risk for getting Alzheimer's disease. It's a major risk factor in coronary artery disease, heart attacks, strokes, the #1 cause of death in this country. If you don't want those big tombstones on your EKG here, these big raised tombstones here, those, what we call a STEMI, an ST elevation MI, from occlusive infarct in one of the arteries of your heart gives that distinctive EKG finding. And you don't want those on your EKG, because if you do, you may also find a tombstone over your grave soon. They go along together there. Sleep deprivation actually increases insulin resistance. In other words, moves you into a pre-diabetic state and can push you on down that road towards diabetes. It's interesting, you can take a group of healthy college students, cut them back on their sleep deprivation so they're getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night, and by the end of 1 week, you can check their blood sugar levels, and they're already going into this, what we would be measured as pre-diabetic. So the metabolism in your body needs sleep to function properly. And not just the metabolism affecting insulin resistance. There's a couple of hormones that control our appetite and how much food we eat. Ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is a hormone that is released from your stomach. And when your stomach is empty and ready to take another meal, you start putting out ghrelin. Ghrelin says to the rest of the body, hey, it's time to eat, we're empty, we can take another meal here. Leptin has sort of the opposite effect. Leptin is released by your fat cells. And if you've got a lot of fat cells built up, you're going to put out more leptin, and leptin goes and tells the appetite center in the brain, it says, hey, we've got a lot of food stored here, you really don't need to eat right now. But with sleep deprivation, ghrelin goes up, hey, it's time to eat, the stomach's empty. And leptin goes down. It quits saying, hey, we've got plenty of food, and so the brain says, hey, well, we need food and the stomach's empty, I think we're hungry. And it puts out those hunger things, and we move on down that road to obesity, affecting so many people here in this country, and with a lot of serious health consequences associated with obesity there. Sleep deprivation contributes to all major psychiatric conditions, including anxiety, depression, and suicide. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're pushing your brain towards more anxiety, more depression. And it means a lot of the other psychiatric conditions as well are pushed over the edge with sleep deprivation. And of course, sleep-deprived driving. Driving home after a night shift, sleep-deprived, can be the same as driving on alcohol. Your reflexes, your response time, everything is off. You can get these, it's like the brain wants to sleep so bad, it starts getting these little micro sleeps. In other words, you're trying to stay awake, and yet the brain kind of shuts off. And you keep doing that, trying to stay awake, responsible for a large amount of the particularly single vehicle accidents, but many of the multi-vehicle accidents as well can be traced back to sleep deprivation, the individual there. The shorter your sleep, the shorter your lifespan. The two go together. Longevity and adequate sleep are definitely paired together. I've heard it said, I'll sleep when I'm dead. If you accept that philosophy, you're going to find that you're going to be dead sooner. You're going to have a shorter lifespan, and that shorter lifespan is going to have a lot more misery, discomfort, and illness of various types in it. So for a longer lifespan and a healthier lifespan, get your sleep now while you're still alive. The elastic band of sleep deprivation can stretch only so far before it snaps. Human beings are the only species that will deliberately deprive themselves of sleep without any legitimate gain. Depriving up yourself of sleep is only going to put you behind, worse, farther out. There's a sleep loss epidemic throughout the industrialized nations. World Health Organization has declared a sleep loss epidemic. United States, UK, Western Europe, Japan, South Korea, all of these countries, the majority of the nation is running on less sleep than they really need. And they're suffering all of these consequences they talk about here. Really metabolic problems and psychiatric problems, mental disease, all of those are increased and enhanced with sleep deprivation. So what is sleep? You know, we spend all this time sleeping. What happens when we sleep? We are not unconscious. We're actually carrying on a lot of very important activities in the brain. The brain is active, but it's active in a very different way, carrying on very different functions, and you're not awake. Consciousness is a condition of the brain in a non-sleep state. And it depends on 8 hours of sleep a day to be able to function optimally in that time there. One of the first questions I suppose to look at is, how do we know when to go to sleep? How does the body decide when to sleep and when to wake up? We have a clock built in there. And let's take a look at the clock here. Here in the, right over here in the very center here, right here, see that little green spot there? The suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's a little cluster of cells. There's a large picture of it here, down here at the base in the center of the brain, or even an expanded picture of that here, of the different kinds of cells that are clustered in there. And of course, those cells have axons and dendrites that send out to all kinds of other centers and are connected to everything. But, you know, in many computers and electronic devices, we have little clocks built into them. Well, your brain is the same way. It's got a little clock built in there. We call it a circadian clock. Circadian means circa, approximately, or about, and day. So circadian days, about a day. So this is a 24-hour clock. There's specialized proteins in there that build up and build down. And the rebalance of this oscillating thing, positive and negative feedback, and it builds up and goes down, goes up, and it oscillates in a 24-hour cycle. And what controls how, when and how that is? It's a daylight clock. It's connected to your eye. Now, most of us are familiar with the eye, and the light comes in through the lens, it shines on the back, and we have the retina there. And here's an expanded picture. If you take just a little piece of this retina and expand it here, the light comes in this way, and right at the base right here, there's kind of a reflective layer here to kind of reflect back as much light as possible from the outer surface here. And these cells here are the rods and the cones, responsible for real dim black and white vision, as well as more brighter daylight color vision with the cones here. And usually when we think about light sensing cells in the brain, these are the cells that sense the visual images that are focused on the retina by the lens of your eye. And the message that they send will go clear to the very back of your brain, and that's where you will see whatever it is you're looking at. But these are not the only light-sensitive cells in your brain, the rods and the cones. There is a third type of light sensor in your eye in addition to the rods and the cones. And that's these cells right up here called ganglion cells. They're very different, and the information they send goes out to neurons, and they do not connect back to the back part of your brain, and you don't see images or pictures with these cells. Instead, these cells send their signals of light back to this suprachiasmatic nucleus here. Here's a picture. Here's our suprachiasmatic nucleus here, our little clock, and sunlight comes in here when we wake up and open our eyes, and it's daylight, and it says, hey, it's daylight. And so the cell starts going into its daylight cycle, and it builds up higher and higher and higher, stronger till the middle of the day. And then as the day wanes and light dims and we move towards night, there's light's not coming in here, it's cooled down, and it knows that it's off here. And it keeps in this daily cycle here, and it's our daily experience of daytime, of sunlight, that keeps the clock running, so our brain knows it's daytime or nighttime. And we were designed to be awake in the daytime and to be asleep at nighttime. Now this little center, remember these are little neurons here, and they got their messages from the little light sensor cells here, which synapsed here, gave them the messages of daylight or not, and it went through its daily clock cycle, and it's sending out a continuous message about sort of where we are in the clock cycle here electronically. In other words, little electrical impulses are coming out, and they're going down to several different centers in the brain here, as well as some down even in the brain stem here. They go down to here, and down in your neck, there's some centers there, and then they come back up to the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is what is going to show us what is going to show everything else in the body what time it is and when it should be doing what it's supposed to be doing. Here's a sort of a little expanded picture. Over here you can see these are the ganglion cells here. And these little ganglion cells here are the ones that are sending their messages back here. Here's our little clock. And the clock is sending messages out here, which is going way down here, up to some other centers, back up to the pineal gland, which is going to release melatonin into the blood to go to the rest of the body. The ganglion cells are also sending some messages up here to some other centers. This particular reflex pathways and all these little things sends a message back to the eye, to the iris of your eye, that opens and closes to control the amount of light going in. You shine a bright light in somebody's eye, what happens? The pupil constricts down. You take the bright light away, it opens back up. These are the little centers that are controlling that. And they know because of the ganglion cells, not the rods and cones. So the ganglion cells are controlling that little reflex. But the one we're interested in right now is that's what's setting your clock. So the clock knows when to be running the daylight cycle, and it's sending the message down here to the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is going to release melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone. Hormones are molecules that control other cells. And in this case, melatonin is going to control all of the other glands and structures in the body that need to be running on a circadian rhythm. You know, it's kind of like if you think of all the different organs of your body as different instruments in an orchestra. Now, if everybody put earplugs in their ears and just looked at their music and started playing a song, after a while, some would be playing a little faster, some a little slower, and pretty soon they'd be all out of sync and then would make terrible disharmony. If you really want to sound good, what do all the musicians need to do? They need to look at the conductor who is doing the beat and showing them when to come and keeping them all on the same beat so they're all going together at exactly the right time. Melatonin is the conductor waving that baton and telling every organ when to do its job. It's like, if you think about it, the different glands put out their hormones at different times. And they know from the melatonin level when it's time for them to do their job. Now, some may come at a different time, just as different instruments may play in different parts and pieces, but they're all watching the conductor, and they know when to come in on their note and play their part based on how the conductor is sending out that signal. This picture, you don't want to memorize this. I just threw this up so you could get a little bit of an idea of the complexity of the various neurotransmitters that are used by the neurons to communicate to all of these centers and eventually to the pineal gland. And if you'll notice here, how many of these centers could be related to the action of various drugs. In other words, we use different medications or drugs because they have a biological effect. In other words, they'll go to, like, here you have GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, used as a neurotransmitter here, here, over here, here. And we're using all these places over here. That particular receptor is affected by the benzodiazepines, Ativan, Valium, those type of drugs. And so anytime you take one of those, besides what it's doing over in your amygdala or other parts of the brain, it's also affecting these areas. And the same with, there's opiate receptors here, there's 5-hydroxytryptophan, there is all these different, acetylcholine down here, norepinephrine here. All of these different things, different drugs are affecting all of those in various ways. And I want you to get a picture of the complexity of the brain, the delicateness of all of these little circuits that have to work just right for everything to go right. When you take a drug, it doesn't just go to the one place where, oh, I'm taking this so it'll make me feel better here, or I'm taking this for this. It's also going to hundreds of different places and messing up how they're working as well. The ideal is that the brain can run clear and clean as God designed it, fresh, without interference, outside interference. He designed just the right balance of everything going on there. Sometimes in emergency cases, we have to use certain medications to override some terrible problem in there. But that's why all medications have side effects, is because they not only do what you want them to do, they also are going to start jamming up the network and all the other places. So the ideal is to come back to the perfect diet, perfect night's sleep every night, so important for all these neurons especially. And in that situation, with proper diet, without toxins, without junk food, and without drugs, we're going to get the best functioning of the brain, the best mind and synapses that God can communicate with. Here's a picture of the melatonin release. Remember, the release of melatonin here is, from the pineal gland, is coming out because the light send it through all these electrical signals, through all these little synapses with their chemicals, and so the knows when to put the melatonin out. Now, if we measured the melatonin in the blood, so now we've got a hormone in the blood. The hormone is melatonin. Here's what it looks like. It's made out of 5-hydroxytryptophan. Here is your level. Going along here, melatonin level in your body is close to 0 during the day. There's no melatonin circulating in your blood. But here in the evening, here we've got about 8 o'clock at night. It's dark. It says, oh, it's nighttime. And melatonin levels shoot up and peak up here till we get really high levels here by the middle of the night. And then they drop off precipitously. In the morning, we're back down to 0 there. And it continues 0 all day long. And it's this pulsing piece at nighttime that helps you to bring on the process of sleep. It's sort of like it's not what makes you sleep, it's what tells you when to sleep. And there's melatonin receptors in the brain, and melatonin is a key that can push you down that. It's sort of like you got a bunch of runners here, ready to run a race, and you've got somebody on the starting line with the starting gun. He says, on your mark, get set, go, boom. Well, melatonin is that firing of that gun, getting everybody moving there on time. Here you can see melatonin controlling the output of cortisol from the adrenal cortex. You'll notice here as the red is the melatonin peaking at night. Notice cortisol is down there. But as the drop in melatonin lets the adrenal gland know, oh, it's time to put out cortisol. So as this drops, it starts pouring out cortisol. Cortisol is going to peak here in the middle of the morning. And cortisol gives you that kind of good top of the morning feeling. Everything's zooming along great now. It was melatonin that put it there at the right time. All of the other hormones in the bodies run on circadian. Your thyroid hormone has a circadian. Here's your body temperature. Notice here, as your melatonin in green there peaks at night, the body temperature drops. It actually goes a few degrees cooler. And that cooling of the body actually induces sleep. It helps. One of the things that helps with sleep, you sleep better in a cool room. You'll sleep better if you're not overheated. And the melatonin is helping to push your body into that by dropping the body's temperature just a little bit there. Melatonin changes with age. That big high peak, that black line up there, is children. Children have the highest melatonin levels. And how much do children sleep? A lot. And they need that sleep. You know that phrase, sleep like a baby? That's melatonin. That's telling the body, hey, you need to sleep, let's turn on sleep, and keeps going. At adolescence, at puberty, there is a drop in that. And now the melatonin peaks every night are not quite as high. And that helps turn the clock on puberty and actually tell the body now is the time. It's part of that change there. But it also starts running at that level, and that's the ideal level probably for the peak or ideal, or the body's running at its greatest at those levels right there. But as time passes and we get to the 40s and 50s, the level gets lower. Now we might start we're not sleeping as well, not as easy to fall asleep. And 50s and 60s, levels are lower. Past 65, I mean, we're way down there, barely peeking out any. In other words, with age, we deteriorate. The amount of melatonin coming out is less and less. This is why we often give a recommendation with age, if there's difficulty sleeping, supplementing with melatonin at bedtime can actually be an excellent to restore that melatonin surge back up to its useful levels there. And so many people recommend melatonin at bedtime. It's not a drug per se. You're just restoring to the body what God always designed to be in there and helping to push this process along into its right, functioning status there. Here's another interesting phenomenon in melatonin. In the gray there, you'll see the normal melatonin peak at night. Here, this nice big peak here. But now see this orange line here, this kind of dotted orange line? Adolescents, the teenagers, high school age kids, their melatonin level shifts forward a couple of hours. And what happens is, ever see why they don't want to go to bed at night? Their melatonin hasn't come up yet. They're not sleepy yet, and they want to stay up late at night. The problem isn't on that end. The problem seems to be on the other end, because now, when the rest of the adult world has them scheduled to get up and get going in the morning, they're in the middle of their deep melatonin sleep cycle, and they need that sleep. And what we end up doing here is cutting off the sleep back here because the alarm goes off, it's time to start school, and so we're actually cutting off all of this sleep that would be going on out here because we didn't go to bed till then, and now we cut it off here. We've really shortened the night's sleep, and we've cut off that late, that morning sleep, which is where your REM sleep is so important for the many parts of learning and functioning. Ideally, we would start high school at 9 or 10 in the morning and then extend it later in the afternoon to get in the hours. But that would be the ideal for learning. There have been school systems that have tried that with excellent results. One of them, everybody's grade point went up. Most students went up about one letter. You know, if they were a C student, they became a B student. If they were a B student, they became an A student. ACT and SAT scores also went up significantly with switching to this later cycle, because now they were learning in the right place. The brain is essential for learning, and the sleep is essential for the brain. So let's take a look at what really is sleep, what is going on there. Here is a diagram of what happens in sleep. So we have here levels of sleep. At the top level right here is being awake. Now, as we move down in here, the very first level here, this next level just below awake, is what we call REM sleep. REM stands for rapid eye movement. And it was observed that at certain times when people are sleeping, their eyelids are closed, but underneath their closed eyelids, the eyeballs are darting back and forth and around and all over the place. And it's just this jerking random movements of the eyes. And so they call it rapid eye movement. They don't know exactly why the eyes do that during this particular sleep, but that's a normal physiological thing to have this rapid eye movement in this one particular phase of sleep. In the other parts of sleep, the eyes are resting quietly and not doing this rapid eye movement, so we call those non-REM sleep. So we have REM sleep and non-REM sleep. And the REM sleep is divided into stages, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, as we go deeper and deeper into very deep sleep here. So when we start off the night, we go through these cycles of sleep. They're about an hour and a half, about 90 minutes. We'll go through a cycle and then come back up. And then another 90-minute cycle and come back up. Another 90-minute cycle, and on through there. We'll do these approximately 90-minute cycles here through the night till we've got in our 8 hours and it's time to wake up and stay awake. There can be some brief awakenings. These really brief ones you probably don't remember in the morning and didn't realize you woke up and thought you slept the whole night. But there was actually, if we measure the brain waves, there is this little peak here. So what is the brain doing during these various stages? We can hook up wires and measure the electrical activity in something we call an EEG. Here is a picture here. On the top here, you can see here, this is the EEG of a normal awake brain. They're small, low voltage, and they're random all over the place, not at particular frequencies. They're just darting everywhere. And that is the normal conscious electrical activity. As you think thoughts, this neuron sending a message here and there, and you're getting sensory input in, you're doing motor things, you're thinking about things, and there's all of these different little electrical activities just bouncing all over the place. And this is what it looks like. There is a place, those are called beta waves. There is a state called alpha waves we find when someone's very relaxed, a meditative, peaceful state of mind. They're at the beach watching the waves, everything is happy and they're not stressing their mind over anything. And these alpha waves are very beneficial, but they're not sleep. The person is conscious and able to think about things and talk and respond appropriately, sense the environment, enjoy the beauty of the scenery. Here is what REM sleep looks at, this highest level. And if you look at it, one thing you'll notice is it looks almost identical to the awake state. And really, from looking at the EEG, you really can't tell the difference between the awake and the REM sleep. This is where dreaming takes place. Dreaming is that state very important for organizing, creativity, so where you sort everything out, get the new thoughts going. And during dreams, you're sort of living through these random pieces being pulled from here to there and connected in unusual ways that were never connected before in your life. But it's just one of those things that happens usually when you wake up, the dream, that REM sleep dream passes. But that's what the electrical activity looks like during REM sleep. Now as we move into the non-REM sleep, we get a much more regular. Stage 1, you see it's a little bit much more regular. It looks a little bit like the REM sleep, but we're starting to become more regular. And if you looked at it closely and compared them, you can see that it's definitely moving. Well, they call them theta waves. And as we go deeper into there, these theta waves, we get these things called sleep spindles here. It's like it goes, and every few seconds, and you get these K waves, these big old flumps in there. Fascinating activity there, what's going on. It's actually memories from the day being stored in your brain. It's fantastic. As we go deeper down here, you get these delta waves, really big, slow wave activity spreading through the brain. They're not random things going from here to there. These delta waves are beautiful to watch. They start right here in your frontal lobe, you know, where your conscious thought and everything is right here. They start right there and they spread back over the brain. It's sort of like during the day unconscious, they're just random things going everywhere. But imagine yourself at a large crowd and audience at a football show and they do a wave, you know. One side people stand up and raise their hands and then sit down, and the people next to them, and as it goes, it just spreads, this wave of people going all around the room, makes a circle around here, and it goes again. And that's what this is. Every neuron in the brain is firing in sequence from the front to the back. It's not sending their axons here. They're each firing electrical activity all the front. You get these high voltage, but slow wave activity. Fantastic stuff. This is what's taking place during these really deep cycles here, these really deep cycles that happen the first thing in the night, so important for restoring your body and getting health. But there's also some deep cleaning going on there. You know, during the day, your brain builds up toxins, waste products, metabolic byproducts, drugs might be. There's all kinds of stuff builds up around there. And these neurons can't function well with all of that other stuff contaminating them, the various waste products and everything. We need a clean wash water to flush and clean that all out. And it's the most amazing thing that happens as these delta waves start coming across the brain. If you imagine your brain tissue looking at like a picture of a city, and there's a city block with all of these streets and avenues crisscrossing back and forth, and there's a river on each side here. One, a river of clean water over here, and one, the drain river over here. What happens during this delta wave sleep, if you could imagine at night, every building in the city shrunk down to about 60% of its normal size. That means all the streets widened up, and suddenly you got these huge, wide spaces between everything. And clear, clean water, cerebrospinal fluid, pours out of the clean water, flushes through the brain, washing all of the debris, the waste product, the toxins, everything is washed out into the other river and washed off down and out to the sea to get rid of it. And for this 90 minutes here, while you're in that deep cycle, all of the brain has just opened wide open and flushing this clear cerebrospinal fluid, just cleaning the whole thing out. And then very shortly, it goes through another cycle. You know, it expands back out, but then it does it again. It shrinks down, and the water flushes it through again, and we get another power wash here. Very, very important to get those power washes cleaning the brain. You know, a little thing to think about, just imagine the brain as an office. And in the office, you've got this desk, and during the day, everything you thought and heard and imagined came pouring in, and it all just kind of piled up on your desk. Everything you heard, everything you did, it's just everything is there. Important, unimportant stuff, everything is there. At night, it's closing time, time to go to sleep, and it's like you pull down the shades, put out the close sign, you become unconscious. But the cleaning crew comes in, the janitors, and they do this deep cleaning, washing, cleaning, crevices, everything in the office. But on your desk, you've got important stuff among those. As you sort through the papers, here's some really important stuff. Maybe you were learning to ride a bicycle that day, or maybe you were learning to play a song on the piano. All of that activity, those motor activities, is important stuff you want to save. And by the way, your frontal lobe actually controls and sorts out. It knows what's important and what's not. And if it's important, you can actually save it. And these little sleep spindles, that's actually passing from the hippocampus, your short-term memory, up to your cortex, where you got it put in the array of this complex cortex that's doing everything important for you and remembering everything, your long-term storage, it's all saved there. And it's these little bzz, bzz. They can actually measure them. Someone that's been working hard on a piano, whatever, it goes to those parts of the brain where you would store that activity. They can measure the little are going there. And if you had other type of things, it's going there, and it goes to the right places to save what you need there. It's sort of like a filing cabinet in the office. You take all the important things and you're putting them in the right folder so you can find them again. A person they could take and practice at the piano over and over and over on the piece, and it still seems like it's not quite right, but they're just doing their best to practice it. They go to sleep at night, get a good sound sleep, it all gets filed perfectly. Next morning, they go out to the piano, and suddenly now it just flows. Why? Because they're not pulling it from the short term. It's already stored in the long coordinated memory. The cerebellum's coordinating it. Everything's working good there. But it's not just important to save the important stuff. We've got to get rid of the unimportant stuff. I mean, you probably, when you went into the store or something, you remember where you parked your car out in the parking lot. Well, that's important to remember a few hours later when you want to find your car. But you don't need to remember next year where you parked it today. That's unimportant information. And it's sort of like you store all of this stuff on a flash drive, and the flash drive is full of everything you've heard and seen, unimportant stuff. What we need to do for the next day, you can only hold so much on the flash drive, so what do? You go through and delete it. You clean it out. And we find that up in this first and second stage sleep here, we're actually can go through and we can actually here store. We're actually cleaning up the flash drive. Here in the hippocampus, we're just cleaning out the flash drive, getting rid of all of that important stuff, deleting it. By now, we've got the desk cleaned off. We saved the important stuff and filed it. We've deleted the unimportant stuff. And now it's time for REM sleep. Now is the time for creativity. Your desk is clean, the office is washed, there's nothing to distract, and the brain can actually start taking different things and come up with creative stuff. All kinds of the things that make life valuable happen in this REM sleep. A lot of people manage sleep deprivation with caffeine. What is it really doing here? In this graph right here, we're looking at a couple of things right here. There is a substance in your brain called adenosine. Adenosine builds up starting in the morning. Your adenosine level starts building up, and it builds up through the day in the brain. And when the adenosine level is high, you feel tired. Tiredness is adenosine being built up in the brain. And the more tired you get is because you've got the adenosine built up. That is the function of it there. And there's special receptors on all the cells. They know adenosine is building up, and they know they're telling you we're tired. Well, the red line there is this ability that's sort of, we want to call it a wakefulness drive. Cortisol and a lot of things contributed to it. It kind of starts off low in the morning, gets stronger and stronger in the middle of the afternoon, and then it fades away. Melatonin is what's going to trigger that change right there. But caffeine is going to alter that. If you look at adenosine and caffeine, you see here these, in the center of it here, this part right here looks very, very similar to this part here. And indeed, caffeine and adenosine can both fit into the same little receptor there. But it's like a key that fits in, but it doesn't quite have all the right notches on it. So it fits in the keyhole, but you can't turn the lock. And that's what here. So caffeine pushes the adenosine out of the way. It gets in there, but it doesn't tell you you're tired. Now suddenly I'm feeling awake. And so because of that, now that's where we get the lift from caffeine. It's displacing adenosine. Here's a very fascinating picture right here. The top picture is a normal brain with all of the adenosine in there. You need adenosine to sleep. But if you go in and with caffeine, particularly caffeine in the afternoon, although there's even a residual from morning coffee, but caffeine later in the day, and especially caffeine in the evening, is going to really displace all of that adenosine. So you're going to feel awake, alert, and you can just keep going, but now it's time to go to sleep, and you want to go to sleep. And what happens to your sleep? You see the difference in the activity. All that bright yellow is actually, because remember, sleep is a very active state of the brain. And here, this very active state of the brain, you can see it there with all of the adenosine, and so we're going all of that normal sleep activity. It's going in the delta wave sleep, it's doing the deep cleaning, it's storing stuff, it's deleting your flash drive, it's getting everything ready for the next day. But with caffeine, we've displaced all that adenosine, so the cells aren't going on and doing the sleep activity that they need. Remember, that's the normal picture. Here is the sleep cycle on caffeine. Notice we barely even touch into stage 3, not into stage 4 at all, just briefly there. So those nice deep cleaning cycles, they're gone. And look at all of the brief awakenings here all night long. And it keeps going. Look what happened to the REM sleep. We barely got a few specks of REM sleep through the entire night here. And again, bouncing around here. So now you may not feel these brief awakenings. You might think, well, I was asleep. But your brain was. I mean, this brain right here is not doing what this brain was doing back here. This is what you want your sleep cycle to look like. This is your sleep cycle on caffeine. And you're not getting the same preparation for the next day. You're not storing the same material. You're not cleaning out your flash drive. You're not doing the deep cleaning. And of course, this is a real simplification. There's a lot of complex things that are still happening, and we're still learning more about it. But you can see that caffeine is a real detriment to a normal sleep cycle. If you want to have a brain that's actually going to function right and do everything right, you're going to need to get rid of the caffeine. You know, we've been advised for many decades now that caffeine is something that needs to be eliminated and removed from our diets entirely. You know, it's one of the things we're going to have to do if we want to have a normal, good sleep cycle, if we want to have a normal neurons, if we have a normal functioning cortex, frontal lobes, all of that depends on a good night's sleep. And good night's sleep depends on being caffeine free. Just remember the difference between those two pictures there. What about sleeping pills to help you sleep? Do they overcome caffeine? No. Sleeping pills is sort of like a mild version of general anesthesia. Now, when you go into the operating room and they give you an anesthetic agent to make you unconscious so you don't feel pain, you don't feel the surgery, and the surgeon can go ahead and operate easily and finish his surgery without you being in pain or thrashing around anything, your brain is just turned off. Remember, sleep is a very active state. There's a lot of things happening. Anesthetics go to the neurons and anesthetize them. They put them out. They just knock them out. They stop working there. And in this knockout state, they're not sleeping. They're not doing anything. You're not conscious. You're asleep. But that's what the sleeping pills are doing. So you're not awake, but you're still deprived of sleep. You're not actually getting the sleep because the sleeping pills are just anesthetizing you. What about alcohol? A lot of people think that a glass of wine at bedtime is an ideal way. The nightcap, it gets you ready and helps you fall asleep, and it's just the way to end the day, calm everything down, and put you to sleep. What does alcohol do to the brain? Alcohol is going to just, doesn't it? It's going to put it out. It's like the sleeping pill. Alcohol shuts down the brain, depriving you of sleep, particularly REM sleep. With alcohol, an alcoholic is very, very deprived of REM sleep because it knocks out REM sleep even more than some of the other phases of sleep. There's almost no REM sleep at all in an alcoholic. In the emergency room, we sometimes get alcoholics at various kinds of crisis, what we call acute alcohol withdrawal. They can go into various DTs and stuff. And one of the aspects of acute alcohol withdrawal is hallucinations. Hallucinations, it's like your REM sleep, all of these various, bizarre images and thoughts and things coming together and colliding in various ways. And during the alcohol withdrawal, the brain, which has been so deprived of REM sleep, now the alcohol is off. The alcohol's all worn off, and now they're in this withdrawal state. And it's like the brain says, we're going to catch up on REM sleep. And it starts going into REM sleep while they're still awake. And they're seeing people that aren't there, and snakes crawling up the wall, and spiders crawling across their bed, and all kinds of stuff like that. And it's a very dysphoric type of REM that's coming back there while they're awake in these hallucinations. And we usually give people sedatives to put the brain out because these are so harmful. Of course, with the alcohol withdrawal, they can go into seizures and a lot of other things, so we want to usually knock that down and prevent that. But alcohol is really not the choice if you want a good night's sleep. I know it's not the popular culture right now, but the reality is alcohol will not give you the sleep you need. What are the things that can help you get the sleep you need? Adequate exercise during the day. Many of us go to bed, we're exhausted mentally, but we physically haven't had the exercise. You need a good workout at the gym, or if you've got a physical job, you've got a real blessing there. Physical exercise of an adequate amount during the day. When you come up to bedtime, the muscles and the other parts of the body are tired enough that they're going to say, okay, we're ready to shift into sleep, and the brain in synchrony with that says, yeah, let's go to sleep now. And the various parts all come together, give you really good sound sleep if you've had enough exercise. Going to bed on an empty stomach is important. If you just go and have a large meal and you haven't digested that meal yet, well, the brain is sending all these messages down through various ganglions, and now we've got to work on the stomach, put out the digestion. You're doing all of this work down here, and it's like, hey, the brain controls all of that. You don't decide when to contract your stomach. Your brain decides that. You don't decide when to move it down the intestines. You don't decide when to go into the colon. You don't decide all these things. They're all done automatically by your brain. But right now we want the brain to go in a sleep cycle. Well, that sleep cycle is going to be mixed up because the stomach's telling us, hey, we got this load of food, we got to do something with it here. And it's sending messages up. And so there's this conflict of the digestive system telling the brain, hey, we can't go to sleep. You got to keep processing this. And the brain saying, okay, well, we'll send you something there. The sleep cycle on there is not, going to be as good in that condition there. Cool, dark, lack of things breaking into it to interrupt it. If you'd like to read some more about this, is an excellent book, came out about a year ago, Why We Sleep. Matthew Walker is a PhD who specializes in sleep studies. He is one of the scientists that has discovered much of the recent information about what's happening during the time we sleep has been through a lot of his work, but he's put together a very readable book here that was really, if you're interested to know more about sleep, I would highly recommend that as a something valuable there. A final thought here. The delicate nerves of the brain are the only channel through which God communicates with man. If you think about that for a minute, we want all of those neurons in the brain to be doing exactly what God designed them to do. And one of those things is going to be able to commune with God. And you need the frontal lobe, all of the other lobes, all of these parts synapsing. You need the neurons clean so they can respond appropriately. Everything about sleep is essential for a normal functioning brain. The sleep-deprived brain is going to make it more difficult. A caffeinated brain is going to find it really difficult. An alcohol brain that's intoxicated, a brain with various mind-altering drugs, sleeping pill, all of these things that come on that alter the functioning of the neurons in the brain are disturbing that delicate balance in there. Remember, there's different little neurotransmitters all over the place connecting all of the parts of the brain. We want our brains to be as clear and finely tuned and as ready as they can be to be sensitive to the voice of God speaking to us. We want to have a clear mind to pray, to think, to put our thoughts together. Well, we need to have stored the important stuff, cleaned out the unimportant stuff. We want the creative parts of the mind working well. And now God's got a temple that he can come and dwell in. The door to the tabernacle is inside you. God's placed it there. That's the temple he dwells in. It's in this brain with these neurons. And sleep, my prayer is that you will have sleep, a sound sleep, and a clear mind, and God will bless you by communicating with you.